Hello and welcome to TA Made Simple, where psychotherapist, TA psychotherapist, Bob Cook, a transactional analyst psychotherapist, someone who's studied the work of Eric Byrne and TA, talks about the many facets of transactional analysis and makes them more accessible and more straightforward. Today you're talking about working with the child ego state, Bob.
Correct. We've been talking about, well, many facets of transactional analysis, and the idea, of course, of parent, adult, child as a basic model of personality, which Eric Byrne invented or created as a way of understanding psychological phenomena in the early 1960s. And we've talked about how we work with a parent ego state. So I'm going to talk about here how we deal with the child ego state. So just to remind viewers, the child ego state, when we access that part of ourselves, we are taking a journey back, if you like, into our history. So it's about when we're operating from that part of ourselves, thinking, feeling, behaving as we did when we were a kid. Often, some people call the unconscious, if you like. So any TA therapist would help a person look at how the past and the present are connected.
Yes.
So make decisions about ourselves, other people in the world, when we are younger. That informs how we are in the present. So the major job of a therapist is help them connect to those decisions from the past, which informs the present, and then help them heal the past so they can be different in the present. So this is about how we actually do that. So we do mainly this is basically a journey using regression. And regression means going backwards. So it's one really good tip for any TA therapist when they're working with the client, and I believe any therapist in many ways, but anyway, is to ask, what age in front of me, psychological age, of the person I'm dealing with? Are they 3, 6, 16? You know, where have they gone back to? Because they're going to go back to the areas they need healing in.
Yes.
So if we can ask ourselves, you know, what age of the child ego state are we talking about that we're revisiting? Then we can attune ourselves to that level, that developmental level that we need to get to. So it's a developmental idea that we are working developmentally when we're working with the child ego state.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because when I heard the word regression, I thought, hey, we've heard these stories of therapists who regress people back, and the difficulties with that, and in fact in America I think it's a banned practice now, isn't it? And but this is very much not about kind of hypnotizing clients and taking them backwards. This is about meeting them where they are, isn't it? Meeting them at the developmental age.
Yeah, I mean, I see regression as a word, if you like, for going backwards. And most of the problems I'm dealing with every day is when people think they're in the here and now, but actually they're coming from a younger state. And by coming from a younger state, they lack the resources of the here and now to solve their problems.
That's really interesting. So how would your approach differ from working with someone who was in the here and now to someone who'd regressed back to, say, a 10-year-old? How would your approach be different?
Well, in the here and now, you'd be talking about how they feel and they think in the here and now, and what's happening in the here and now, and what's causing the person to come in the first place. What are the resources around them that they're not using in the present that they could be using to solve the problems they've come with, whether it be depression, whether it be eating disorders, whether it be relationship issues. What's happening in the present that they're not accessing to be solving the problems that they could do, because otherwise they wouldn't be coming to see you.
Yes.
And usually, if you don't go back to the past, if you do not go back to the past, you are going to be staying in more problem solving in the present, or helping them manage their feelings in the present,
right?
Or helping them understand emotional regulation in the present, or helping them developing strategies for dealing with difficult positions or states in the present. However, that's fine to a certain extent. So, if it's short-term therapy, particularly, for example, yeah, and it helps people, give them resources and ways of being that perhaps they didn't realize they had. However, if you really want to help a person move away from simply a behavioral cure or even a cognitive cure, you need to go back to see how the past affects the present at a developmental level to help them make connections between their past and the present so they can heal where the trauma actually was and anchor it in the present.
So what sort of techniques would you use? So you've got someone and you say, well, I feel about 12. So how would you work with that 12-year-old present in the room, that 12-year-old part of that client?
Well, there's many different ways, but I'm going to talk about one classic one, which comes from Gestalt psychotherapy, a different type of therapy, which is devised by Fritz Perls. Some people would say the technique I'm talking about goes way back into the 1920s with Marino, who's the father of psychodrama. Yes. But let's just look at what Gestalt offers, and most viewers might know, which is the two-chair technique. Yeah, where you might say to the person, okay, so you feel like there's part of you which is very young, say 12. Put that part of yourself on the chair, and let's talk to this part of yourself and find out what this part of yourself is thinking and feeling. So go onto that chair, let's talk to this part of you. And so from this position, what stops you accessing resources or whatever it is? And they're going to usually probably say some parent figure, if you like. When dad is saying this, I feel I can't do this. When my mother defines me like this, I feel I have to shut up.
Yes.
So I'm looking at the conflictual parts of the person that they're holding inside themselves, the younger part, and usually the parent part, and helping them develop a dialogue or mediation, if possible, with the protection of myself, to say and to take ownership of perhaps parts of themselves that they've repressed or disowned for a long time.
Yes. So maybe that resourceful part of them that was unavailable at that developmental level, like not being able to say no or not being able to take themselves out of the situation, not being able to fight back, that type of thing.
Yeah, to be assertive, self-esteem issues, being angry, or whatever it is. I mean, if you go right back to Freud, who talked about the superego, we talk about those conflictual parts of ourselves, usually the child and parent, or the younger unconscious part of ourselves which has been repressed, and what Freud called the superego, the authoritarian part of ourselves, which is bearing down on the younger part of ourselves, and therefore we get conflicted.
Yes. And in Freudian terms, of course, the ego is the mediator, isn't it? Between the kind of societal and parental kind of rules and the id, which is the uncontrollable, the ultimate free child.
So that's one really good way. So very quickly on to a couple of others. Dream therapy. In other words, interpreting dreams. Now, dreams can be looked at in the Freudian sense in terms of unfulfilled desires, and we could analyze them. Another way of looking at dreams is each aspect of the dream, whether it be television or radio or different darker parts of yourself or whatever, are actually different conflictual parts of the self. So we could look at and analyze the dreams from the conflicts that come out in dreams, and that would take us back into the child. Another really popular way of getting to the child, of course, is art therapy. And a very good tip of working, I think, often to get to the child, is that you ask the client to write with the less dominant hand. So if they're right-handed, they like to draw with their left hand.
Yes.
And that brings them right back into their internal younger struggles.
Yes.
And they start drawing, if you like, and expressing their inner world at a younger level.
Yes.
That's another way to work with a child, which I really like. And when working with children, they really, no, proper children I'm talking about here, not just the child ego stage within the adult. They really like the freedom of expressing their younger self with graphic demonstrations of conflicts and desires which haven't been fulfilled. So getting them to actually, then there's things like sand play,
Yeah.
which is a really interesting one. Again, which is helping the person go to a younger child state. So we could use relaxation techniques. So there's many ways of accessing these different parts of ourselves.
What are the pitfalls that practitioners have to consider when taking this line, this therapeutic line, if you like?
I tell you what I think, there's many, but one of them I think is the danger of infantilization.
Uh-huh.
In other words, that as you start to explore the younger part of themselves, right, you, in the therapy, may keep them so young at the age of 5, 6, 12, whatever it is, that they don't ever grow up or get to a place where they can use the resources and integrate it into their adult because they stay so young. And the narcissistic therapist, who actually maybe is doing the therapist, haven't done enough therapy on themselves or whatever it is, gets a lot of ego strength from actually keeping the child quite young.
It would be a good way of keeping clients for a long time, wouldn't it?
Yes, unfortunately.
I
mean, I smile, but the truth is, yes, they don't grow up, they don't leave, and they stay for years in an infantilized state.
Yeah, so maybe if you're in therapy yourself and that's how you feel, that's something to consider. I mean, I wonder if the other dangers, if you're taking someone back to a place in their history where there's been, say, a lot of trauma, a lot of abuse, is there a danger there that you could re-traumatize a client?
Yes. Now, let's use some words here for this: reliving, re-experiencing, and re-traumatizing. 3 different types of words. So, obviously, if you take somebody, you're completely right. You do not want to have a person relive their own trauma. Because otherwise you are, as you say, re-traumatizing people, and what will happen is they go over and over and over and over again in this traumatized state. In fact, you're doing worse good than, it's keeping them stuck. And then you've got reliving. Now let me just, which I'll just explain if you like very quickly. So when somebody is traumatized, the way they deal with trauma actually is to find self-stabilizing techniques or coping mechanisms. So Edith Egar, for example, in the book we've just been talking about, or people who have been really, in Afghanistan or where traumatized through their own childhood, will have found ways to cope, to dissociate, or many different types, to turn to self-medication like drugs, alcohol, or whatever it is. So they find ways to cope. Now, as a psychotherapist, part of the journey back towards the child is also to get in touch and help them get into touch with their self-stabilizing or self-coping techniques. And as they start to do that, just as they start to do that before they're going to relive the actual trauma, you help them find new, more healthy ways to go forward. So just as you start to work towards the trauma, you start to find out what the techniques of coping were, and then you help them relive in a different way or re-experience the process in a different way with different coping mechanisms.
Yes. Yeah, so it sounds like a technique that is very nuanced and one that should be undertaken with the right amount of training input.
And supervision.
Supervision, yes, I was going to say that.
Supervision, because it's a fine dance between re-experiencing and re-traumatizing. So you take them to what I would call the therapeutic edge.
Yes.
Yeah, so you don't take them into the re-traumatization. you help them find different ways to re-experience more healthy coping mechanisms.
I think that's a really good term, the therapeutic edge, because it literally is an edge, isn't it?
Right at the edge.
Right at the edge. Yeah, and certainly it's not one, to practice, without being taught it, supervision, and also I suspect not a technique to use right at the opening curtains of therapy.
Oh no. Yeah, that's, this is for people who are more qualified, really. This is for people who have experienced many clinical hours, done their placement, started to graduate from their training, learning how to work with the younger parts of the self, working how to work with trauma and PTSD, how to help people go to the therapeutic edge so they can find different ways of coping which are more healthy.
Yeah. So I guess if you're watching this and you're a student, I guess the message is that this is really more advanced techniques, not to be got into without a lot of thought, a lot of input in supervision, and a lot of training, and it would depend, I would suspect, greatly on the relationship that you had with the client as well. You would have to have a specific, a strong therapeutic alliance with the client.
Definitely, and at a very simple level, you may just want to, if you don't want to go down into dealing with the trauma and down into dealing with the early deficit or reparative work, you could deal with what Eric Byrne talked about, the contaminations from when a person thinks they're an adult but they're actually a child, or thinks they're an adult and they're an parent, and that's called decontamination, which I've talked about at an early stage. So you could just work with the contaminations of the child and the adult without actually visiting the trauma, and help them develop a stronger adult so they can be in the here and now. But if you're going to work deeply in the child ego stage, you're quite right, Rory, you need to get good training in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's just absolutely fascinating. Apart from just the theory, just seeing that put into practice, I think it's going to be so useful for anybody who's watching. And that, of course, is working with the child ego state. If you want to look at the rest of Bob's explanations of TA theory and how it's applied, please have a look at the other videos on the site. And also, there's a playlist. So if you look for the playlist on the YouTube site, click it. It covers the whole of TA training, and it's being added to all the time. I think we've got about 12 videos now talk about TA. Ideal if you're a trainer. If you want to set some homework or something for your students, and it's ideal, of course, if you're a student of counselling and psychotherapy. And as always, Bob Cook, thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.